Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, brought to you by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford, VA. Virginia Tech beat Tulane 41-20 in the Military Bowl. Rob, how you feeling, buddy?
I feel vindicated. On top of feeling awesome, vindicated. That's how I feel.
Yeah,
Uh,
man, you had it. You had it. That score, right? We'll talk about it in a second. Why don't you give us a cheers? Kick this thing off.
Cheers to the slop. Our motto was a mutter, and we went out there. We fell victim to holding on to the ball and ball security a few times, but it didn't do enough damage, and we came away with an awesome Military Bowl win. Cheers to all the fans that went out to the game. I know you traveled down to be a part of some of the festivities that were going on that day, but cheers to everybody showing up and the team showing out for what was a awesome game.
Cheers. Yeah, I did make my way down to Annapolis. I was a part of an indoor tailgate going on at the hotel, and we did a little live broadcast with Billy and Pat, and all the other guys were over there at the Graduate Hotel. It was a lot of fun, and you can go to the YouTube channel and find the live stream, and there were some interviews on there that were quite funny, including, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the guy impersonating Frank Beamer, some of the Billy and Pat comments and quotes. Like it's worth a watch, and it's not too long. It's maybe like 30 minutes, but just for the Frank Beamer impersonator. And I honestly, like, I don't know that guy's name right now. I can't think of it off the top of my head. He's
It
amazing.
was incredible. You sent me the link. I I've never heard a lot of I've heard people make Frank Beamer quotes and use the quotes a lot because he had so many of them. I've never heard anybody do a Frank Beamer impersonation ever, and that was spot on. It was
I mean,
lights
you
out.
close your eyes, you think it's 2001 Frank. Like, that's
Mhm.
but obviously we were playing the green wave, and so he started talking about riding a boogie board on a wave and like doing the boogie board motion, and I was just like dying. Like, it was so funny. But anyway, go check that out on YouTube. That win for us, it gives us the first winning season since 2019. And even 2019 didn't end with a bowl win. To
Mhm.
win the bowl, have a winning season, I mean, it feels pretty darn good. You'd have to go back to 20, I think it was 16, right? Because we won the Belk Bowl and that comeback
Yes.
that me
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
famously watched at Hooters.
Famously, we watched it at a Hooters.
But
What a day.
yeah, what an end to this season. And we're going to get into just kind of the reaction to what do we look like going forward? How do we feel about the program going forward? But first, let's start with some news and notes. And we will start with the playoff and the semis that happened the other day. Michigan beat Alabama in overtime, 27-20. And that game, I felt like both teams didn't want to take it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
to Bama's credit,
Mhm.
they kind of weathered the storm and had the lead, and it looked like they were going to close it out. And Saban, in a year when his team's not perfect and doesn't have a perfect quarterback, was in pole position until that drive by Michigan.
The the teams very much reversed roles from the first half to the second half. Alabama was just getting walked over by Michigan's defense, who was completely controlling the line of scrimmage and causing a lot of problems. And you knew that couldn't carry on and that there would be some adjustments at halftime. I didn't anticipate Alabama to make that stark of a change and that much adjustment because they looked like a completely different team in the second half. And unfortunately for Michigan, all of the benefits that they had in the first half kind of went against them, and they had that muffed punt return for the touchdown. They really shot themselves in the foot in a lot of instances that they could have taken a little bit more of a lead and given themselves a little bit of buffer into that second half. And credit to Alabama for putting up a really tough second half, but Michigan ultimately held on.
Yeah, that drive and that catch by Wilson was so awesome. I
So
think it was
clutch.
Wilson, the number
Yeah.
1 on the side, and he had just caused a penalty a couple plays before that,
A bad penalty.
a bad penalty, and he redeemed himself with that, and then he scored the touchdown to
Mhm.
tie the game, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah, me
and
and my
so
wife were talking about it because he had the block in the back that
uh-huh.
didn't need to be done, and then he came back, he had a big play because he had the next long play, and then he also caught the touchdown, so immediately redeemed himself, but
You
he
d
was
yeah, he did a Lloyd Christmas, man. He
yes.
he totally redeemed himself. But Michigan ends up winning, and now they're favorites in the title game. And we're going to talk about the title game at the end of the show. But let's get to the other game. Washington hung on to beat Texas 37-31. And in this game, Michael Penix was throwing dimes, like into the tightest windows, perfect throws.
When was the last time you've ever seen a college quarterback make some of those throws into that small of windows? I mean, there were a couple windows where it was on the one long pass into the center. It was like a 35-yard pass, 40-yard pass. The guy had everybody draped over him, and the ball came into a window that must have only been 10 inches big, right into his hands. I cannot remember a college quarterback being that just lethal with, some of the accuracy on those balls. It was crazy.
Yeah, it really was amazing, and each one I was like, "Oh my god, that throw was amazing," and then it would happen again and again and, like, down the sideline, and
Yeah.
he was great, and they were in control of that game.
Yeah.
They got a 10-point lead with, like, 2.5 minutes left, and I think it was 10 points, and
Yeah.
it looked like it was over, like, Texas was gonna need a miracle, and damned if they didn't almost get that miracle. They get the ball back. They're driving. They have several shots at the end zone, including a final one where like the DB makes that swipe and
Yep.
swats the ball away, and Washington
Eh,
almost lost that game,
Yeah.
even though they controlled the whole time.
Beautiful coverage on that. But yes, way too dangerous. And they almost lost this game. It was an awesome game. Both
Yeah,
games
both
were
games were great.
great. Well, this we're going to look back and say, this was one of the best playoffs I think for a while because the games were so tight. But Texas again, Washington controlled this game, and Texas would not go quietly into the night. We'll go with the Independence Day quote. So it was awesome.
Yeah,
But yeah,
they. I think Texas could have helped themselves out a bit by running the ball more. I think
yep,
that was some of the commentary on the cover three and some other places that they really didn't run the ball enough. They only had 28 carries to like 43 throws. Now, I know they were down, especially at the end, but earlier in the game, like their running backs, despite not having their top guy with the ACL tear, like they they
mhm,
could have run the ball more and to
yes,
keep Penix off the field because every time they came on the field, those three wide receivers, I mean, it's essentially like an NFL quarterback and NFL wideouts
yeah,
every time out. And so,
yeah.
like, it's just so hard to stop. You need to keep them off the field. And I would imagine that's what Michigan is going to try to do in the next game.
I would absolutely agree that, and I think, how do you feel about, not to forecast too much, but how do you feel about Michigan's defense versus Texas and their defense? The big uglies up front for Texas are just nasty. I mean, those guys are huge
Their
and
defensive
big.
tackles,
Yes.
yeah, they have really good inside pressure on Texas. I think with Michigan, you might actually get a little bit more edge rush
Mhm,
than Texas has.
mhm,
Uh, but it's close. The thing about Washington is their offensive line has played so well.
mhm.
Penix does not take a lot of sacks. No one's really gotten to him much this season. And he's skilled at getting rid of the ball too. So even if that pressure is coming in, is he able to elude it? Is he able to get rid of the ball without taking the sack? Even if there is a bit more pressure. But it's going to be a battle. I can't wait to see this game. I'm actually surprised the line's sitting at 4.5. We'll give a little bit more analysis at the end of the show.
Yep.
CFB Monday, the show I've been doing all season long, except for maybe the last couple weeks, is doing the final show of CFB Monday on the National Championship Monday, January 8th, next Monday. we're doing the national championship special, is what we're going to call it. We're going to have Pat and Billy on there. We're going to have Rob on there. Sam Jesse's going to be on. Many guests. There will be a lot of different dudes giving their opinions as we kind of. We're not watching the game due to, for obvious reasons, we can't broadcast the game, but it will be on. We'll be updating you on the game. Save a screen for our broadcast because it's going to be fun.
Yeah, is that black tie?
No,
That
no black tie required.
uh,
We're both
uh,
wearing hats tonight. I might not wear a hat. How about that?
okay. I'll put gel in my hair maybe. I'm very excited for this. It's something you in particular have mentioned, and I have agreed with that we've talked about doing for a long time.
Mhm.
So it's awesome that it's finally happening, and for a huge, awesome game.
I think I might give you a first question to the first guest too.
Ooh, I
And it's a
like
good
that.
guest. It's a very good guest. We'll get those
Ooh.
announcements out ASAP, but he might be known as the voice of the Hokies.
Oh, wow. I would love to ask him a question.
That's right. That's right. So make sure you're hanging out with us. 7:30 p.m. is the kickoff time listed. We'll probably be going live right around then. But right as the kick goes, the Sons of Saturday channel, we will go live and you will see our four smiling faces before we bring on our guest. So get ready for that next Monday. Roster update, Rob. A couple things happened since we last recorded with French and Doug, which was a really fun episode. Jack Hollifield, Dax's brother, entered the portal, and that was on the heels of Hunter McLean, one of our other offensive linemen, entering the portal. So we're losing a couple of the big guys up front. We knew that some attrition was coming. We know that the numbers are going to be crunched, and this won't be the last. Once the
Mhm.
semester starts, we're going to see some more, and after spring, we'll see some more. But Jack, with his brother being such a long term and great Hokie and Dax, like it stinks that his career didn't work out.
Yeah.
Maybe because I think he came in as a tight end. Like maybe if
Yep.
he played a different position or the coaching staff didn't turn over, his career could have been different. But Jack, thanks for being a Hokie, and we'll miss you. And then Hunter, we barely knew ye, but we also wish him the best. It was also said that Grant Wells will be moving on, and that's how it was put, moving on from the program. I don't know if that means he's transferring or he's retiring from football or what. I'm not sure of his eligibility, but that was a quote from Pry that Wells will be moving on. So there will be a new QB2 next year.
Yes, there will, and I wish him the best of luck. I don't know what the plan would be if he's planning on transferring, but I hope he finds an awesome landing spot or whatever he does. Best wishes in his ventures ahead.
Yeah. He's already married. He's a good looking kid. He'll land on his feet, I'm sure.
Yeah, he'll be good.
Um, thanks for your service, Grant Wells. In terms of the portal additions, defensive tackle Kelvin Gilliam committed to the Hokies on December 7th. He's transferring in from Oklahoma, but this is another player from Highland Springs. This is a Virginia kid from that hotbed of Richmond that we've been going back to over and over again. And he was originally a composite 4-star edge rusher in the class of 2021, the 107th ranked player in the country. He was a very, very high recruit. I'm not sure anyone on our roster would have been a higher recruit coming out of high school than Gilliam. So the talent is there. Now, in terms of what he contributed to Oklahoma, he got on the field, but it wasn't a ton. He had a lot of injuries, and I think there's a reason that he's transferring. I
Yeah.
think there's still something that can be gotten out of there. I mean, we saw
Mhm.
Darius Payne,
Yeah.
transfer over from Nebraska. He took an injury, still was a huge contributor for us this year.
A
And so
huge.
I think a guy with this talent, I'm excited about bringing him in.
I think it's good and a position of need as we have talked about. So more depth. You never know who's going to be the one that steps up, and or a couple that step up. So let's. I'm good, and Andy's coming back to home, coming back to
Right.
Virginia, which is nice. So he'll be local and playing for a school that we would have loved to get him from the beginning. So we'll see how he develops in the orange and maroon.
And JC Price just had some success with APR, had some
Mhm.
success with a former transfer in Darius Payne. The defensive line had a lot of sacks this year.
Yep.
So this could be a good landing spot for him and Copeland and Aeneas Peoples. Like we knew that we had a weakness at defensive tackle going into this offseason, and boy, did they attack it.
Yep.
This is really nice to load up on some of those big boys. Other big news. Nick Gallo coming back to the program. That was a couple nights ago. We weren't sure what Nick was going to do. We've been waiting for this announcement. You talked about a blocking tight end, Robbie. Well, I think we might have gotten him.
I think I talked it into existence. Let's put it that way. And he's back. I think that is a a huge return. I think knowing how many people were returning for next year and the positivity helping, in the program, how we finished off the season, there's it makes a ton of sense. It's a position of need for us. We have another tight end that's transferring out. There, all of this makes logical sense
Mhm.
for I think both sides. So I am very glad that he will be sticking around in the program for 2024.
I just wanted to take a couple seconds here to talk about National Signing Day. It was a couple weeks back. It was before the bowl, but we never did a podcast together to talk about it.
Mhm.
It was really cool with the coverage. They live streamed it this year, and it was like the VT draft. It was just
Yep.
like the NFL draft with the little ESPN tone and everything. And there was a couple guys in this class. We were fighting off people up until the last minute to sign, like Reddish. Like I know
Yeah.
Ohio State was trying to just try to steal him away. But when you look at the class as a whole, 6 of the 19, well, it's now 20 guys because some of my notes were done before. But if you include Gilliam, that's 20 guys. That's 7 of the 19 guys are from Virginia, including Copeland and Gilliam. And
Wow.
then 2 more from Maryland and 4 more are from North Carolina, including Peoples, which got I think the Peoples thing got a little dicey too, with a little
Yeah.
bit of like, will he or won't he go back to Duke after we talked about it?
Yep.
He did a podcast with the 247 guys.
Mhm.
We should be good. I think that just dropped the other day. I think
Mhm.
Peoples is in the boat and we are good. But that is a ton of guys in the footprint to
Local.
bring into the program. And some of the guys that maybe didn't start out as ours coming back to the footprint, which we just talked about, which is what Pry has been trying to do with these relationships. So I think the strategy is working.
Yes.
If
I would
in
agree.
my opinion, I think like as we move forward here and getting this bowl win, there are more and more things for him to sell. Is that your take on it?
Yeah, I think more things for him to sell, um, players coming back, which is showing it just the not the attrition. It's also shows a commitment to getting guys NIL money, which is important, and picking what school you're going to go to,
Mhm.
and whether that money's making its way to you right away, or whether you think, hey, if I improve next year, is there a way for me to get some of that? That I think goes a long way, shoring up things with the high school. A lot of those players, even if they're going elsewhere, probably stay in touch with local coaches. I mean,
Mhm.
so if you can, there's a little bit of uh, additional benefit you can get from shoring up things with the high school coaches in and around Virginia. And that's if they're staying in touch with those people while they're at other schools. It's like, hey, have you thought about if you're coming back? Give a look back to the Hokies, and it could be a fit for you.
When we were kind of rolling, even in the early 2010s, and we would still miss out on a lot of high profile
Mhm.
recruits. We would finish second, we would finish third. And then they're gone.
Yep.
No, there wasn't many transfers, whatever. There is value to
Mhm.
finishing second and third now. Like
Yeah.
to make sure that you keep that relationship good up until the end, because APR comes back around. Gilliam comes back around. Copeland, I don't know if we ever recruited Copeland the first time, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Like second place, it may be second place for a year.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's so critical with the transfer portal to make sure you're even if you don't think you have a shot with some of these higher end guys to take a shot because they might end up in your lap in a couple years.
Yeah. I spent some time in Ohio talking with, I was out with 4 guys that are all huge Ohio State fans. And they were talking, we got to talking about the status of where college football sits and all of those sorts of things. And my comment to them was, they look at everything from perennial top 10 football status, right? And I think what they were missing and what I was trying to articulate to them is what you and I have talked about is the parity that is happening right now has never been greater given how much flexibility there is amongst the players to be able to move. It
Mm,
used to be you go to Alabama, you got to ride the bench, wait your, 2 years. If not, if you want to transfer, you're going to have to sit out a year. And so you're like, okay, I'll stick around in Alabama. And they had these loaded rosters. Those players that can now move and go to other programs is causing this mountain to spread out. The bell
mhm.
curve is getting a lot wider for teams, and there's more people coming to the middle. And I think we saw that this year in the rankings and what was happening with teams and some of the teams that have elevated themselves over the last few years. And that, to your point, is why coming in second and third is important because yes, that player may go to Ohio State and that player may go to Alabama or wherever the case may be or Georgia. But if they end up, riding the bench and they get stir crazy and they want to get out or go somewhere else, then you want to be that team that could go. And that doesn't mean we know we're not going to have the same um, the first team roster as a Georgia, as an Alabama, as an Ohio State. You just have to understand that's where college football is. The goal isn't to have that type of class. The goal is to build the team that's just underneath it and have things fall the right way and get to put together a good season and then punch some guys in the nose and punch it above your weight class and then make something happen.
Yep.
That's what the goal is now. So you got to have and be in a good position for those guys that don't necessarily make it, or they get injured or something weird happens, and then you're right there to if they want to come back to the
It
footprint.
is interesting with the portal and NIL that even schools that may not be in the top 25, they can ante up some money and they can get one really good 4-star, maybe even a 5-star. Like I know Missouri has some crazy state laws where they can allow high school players to make NIL money if they go to an in-state school. So you
Yeah,
saw Mizzou grab like a top recruit this year because he was from Missouri. But like there was a lot of things like that happening where the wealth is starting to spread because oh, well, let's keep this one kid home. Let's just pay a bunch of money and get this quarterback. Look what Nebraska just did with the quarterback. Like
yeah,
5 years ago, that quarterback never ends up at Nebraska, right?
correct. Yep,
Like there's
that's
just
right.
no way. And so it has changed things, and there is a little bit of a leveling, despite the fact that we've had like 6 undefeated teams through 10 weeks this year. I still think none of those teams were unbeatable. They
Yeah,
happened to be undefeated, but like we're seeing it now, like are any of these teams flawless? No.
no,
Like I don't know who's going to win the Natty because
no,
no team has distinguished themselves. Georgia still might be the best team and
yeah,
they're not in the playoffs. So it's an interesting time in college football. And we're getting a little bit of off topic, but it relates to the signing class and the fact that Pry's doing the right things to make us competitive and the way you worded it earlier,
mm,
you bide your time, you fill out your roster, you develop, and then maybe you get that quarterback. Maybe you get a player or two to put you over the top and you can make a run. And
mm,
maybe our run's next year. Who knows?
yeah,
We're going to have a veteran team coming back. But let's talk a little bit about before we get to the bowl. I want to mention the basketball team. We haven't done a basketball team update. It didn't go so well against Wake recently. We had won 4 in a row after the consecutive losses to FAU and Auburn. We beat Louisville, Valpo, Vermont, and American.
mm,
None of those teams were very good. 4 comfortable victories, though. And we saw some great performances. We saw a performance from Lynn Kidd that was 17 and 11. And then against American, he dropped 31 and 11. Like
crazy.
I think he went 14 of 15 from the field against some lesser competition, but nevertheless, 31 points in a college game is pretty outrageous. We are currently 9-4. We sit at 63rd in the Ken Palm. Our tournament hopes are still alive. We have a win over number 17 Iowa State, 17 in the Ken Palm, and 64 Boise State in the Ken Palm. Those are decent wins. We have to play well in ACC play if we want to get into the tournament, without a doubt. the Wake loss is demoralizing. We've had some demoralizing losses in the past. I think Wake might have done this to us
Yeah.
last year, the year before. There was some Wake game that kind of went this direction. But we're going to have to start playing better and quick because we play Florida State on January 6th on the road in Tallahassee. They've always given us problems.
Mhm.
I'm not sure about the identity of this team. I think we know we have shooters. I
Yeah.
think we know we could be a little bit more athletic at times, and that hurts us. Um, but when we're not shooting well, like we did in the first half against Wake, it gets ugly quick.
Yeah. You look at the it depends on how you want to look. You have 4 losses in this team. We're 1-1 in ACC play, but 3 of those losses were blowouts. It's not, they did not go well. 3 of the 4. And I think where this team is struggling is in the past we have if we wanted to muddy up a game and then we could kind of keep it a low scoring affair and use our defense to keep us in a game. And what's happening with this team in particular is that if our opponent gets up to a first half lead, we are not able to really stop the momentum, to really box it in and shut it down and keep it a close game. What keeps happening is they're getting team goes up on a first half lead. We maybe inch up close and the momentum comes right back, and then we're getting kind of blown out. This team really needs to tighten up in order to make a decent run in ACC play and fill out that resume to see where things are going to shake out at the end of the year. But the identity is confused
Yeah.
a little bit, I think, is in comparison to what we had seen over the last 5 years.
Well, I'll give you one of the reasons why the identity seems confusing is our defensive rating on KenPom is higher than our offensive rating. Like that doesn't make sense for a Mike Young team. I'm not saying that we've never played good defense, but I think
Yeah,
you understand there that
yeah,
doesn't really. We thought we'd kind of be lethal offensively from with this team, with the way they can
mhm,
shoot the ball at times, and
yeah,
it's not really turned out like that. So I'm hoping they'll get themselves on track. And if I were going into the second half of the season wanting one side of the ball to be better and looking for answers, I would rather the offense be looking for answers because I
yeah,
have faith that Mike will get it there. Coach Young, I should call him. I'm not on
yes,
a first base name basis with him, despite meeting him. Coach Mike Young, my coach.
yeah,
I know that I know that he'll get it together offensively and we'll be better down the stretch. It's
yeah.
going to be tough though to make that tournament this year. I'm hoping we can do it.
And FSU's never their size and their athleticism every time is
Yeah.
always kind of a
They rarely have bad seasons. Last season was an
mhm,
aberration for them
yeah.
typically. So, all right, let's do a quick ad read and we'll get to the game recap of the Military Bowl. Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence is brought to you by McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford. Who doesn't love supporting a local family owned and operated business? I know Robbie does, and you know I do. That's exactly what you get with McCoy's. They were established over 40 years ago, offer full service, including major and minor repairs. They do oil changes and state inspections, all that run of the mill stuff. You don't know where to go or take your car, take it over to McCoy's. They can rebuild your transmission, they can rebuild your engine, diesel repair, fleet service. They do it all. And they also sell tires. I know the East Coast is about to get slammed with some snow.
We think
Make
so. It looks like it.
it's
It's
starting
been
to look like it. DC is always that snow hole, but they might even get something down your way, Rob. But make sure you have your car all set up for the cold weather. Get those tires. And McCoy's can even pick up or drop you off too if you can't get to the shop with work. So head over to McCoy's Auto Repair in Radford for all of your vehicle maintenance needs or give them a call. The number's right on the screen, 540-639-2933. And you can also find them on Facebook. Just like that old hooky buddy of yours, McCoy's is a name you can trust. And McCoy's must have been our good luck charm because they got us a winning season.
That's
First
right.
year with McCoy's, we're 1-1, got a winning season.
Look, could you ask for anything more in a
Right.
sponsor? If they're gonna bring wins, then they'll be our sponsor for a long time.
That's right.
Love it.
Are you drinking anything over there, Rob?
Just some green tea tonight. Not having anything special. What do you got going on over on your side?
Well, I put out a picture on our Instagram of a handful of holiday beers I still had left over from the season. make your own six-pack stuff people brought to my house or I picked up at my sister's place. But I'm drinking the Goose Island Christmas IPA.
Oh,
It is a beautiful looking can. Got the red
yeah.
and green on there. Haven't had a goose in a little bit on the show.
Yeah. It looks like you should make that into a sweater.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
can is very cool. It's got the Christmas ball on the back and everything.
Yeah.
It's I don't wouldn't know that it's a Christmas beer. Let me put it
Okay.
that way.
All right.
If it weren't for the title. It's just like a straight up IPA, kind of like a almost like that winter warmer vibe. Like I do
Yeah.
feel like I'm warming up as I drink it. A little bit
Mhm.
later, I'm about to crack this one. This is the Holiday Ale. I've never had
Yeah.
this
I like that.
from
New Belgium?
New Bell. And this
Okay.
is another mainstream. So I got two mainstreamers tonight for the people that can grab these just about anywhere. I'll give a review on this as we go through our national championship picks. And finally, this is one of my every year favorites. I just wanted to show you. I already killed this one.
Mhm.
Shiner Holiday Cheer. This has been out for a few years. It's kind of a weird one if you read the description. Peaches and pecans. It's an
Mhm.
ale brewed with peaches and pecans. It just kind of has a little bit of a fruity taste. It's a light beer, 5.4%. But me and my cousin Sean, we hit this every year. It's a really solid beer for if you're looking for a little change of pace from the stouts or the ales or whatever. This holiday cheer is a nice little fruity, different kind of tasting beer.
So you're saying that somebody at Goose Island like woke up 2 weeks before Christmas and was like, "Oh shit, we got to put out a Christmas ale," and just like threw something in a can.
That's exactly what happened. Like
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's exactly what happened because you know how a lot of times there's like a description.
Yeah.
Oh, this has some spices. It's got some
Yeah. They
nutmeg or
throw like
whatever.
some nutmeg in it, and it's like, okay, we're good. Well, at least we can,
No, there's
put
no
out.
description. It just says Christmas IPA on it. The New Belgium one, for instance, says flavors of cranberry and spice and everything nice. So like
Okay.
they're giving you a little something. So
Yeah.
I'll try that one in a minute. Let's get into the game recap, man, because
Let's do it.
this game it kind of gave you a little bit of everything, including including the weather.
Yeah.
It started with a scoop and score for Tulane. The slippery ball was a sign of things to come. We answered with a field goal and recovered a muff punt that Drones ran in for a touchdown a play later. Tulane tied it with a field goal, 10-10, and they were threatening, but they fumbled on the goal line, thanks to a great play by Feldarius Payne, saved the score for the moment, but ultimately Tulane did tie it. And then we put together an 11 play, 75-yard drive capped with the TD pass to St. Germain, the first of two touchdown passes to tight ends on the day. That was right before the half. Started the second half with our fourth fumble of the day. Tulane capitalized on the TD run by Horton, tie game again. And that's when I thought at that point, I'm like, this is just going to be one of those days where like they're going to cover. We're not going to look good. I still felt like we'd get the win, but I was
Mhm.
starting to get nervous. But that is when Kyron and Tootin went to work. There's a 50-yard run by Drones and a 44-yard run by Tootin on the next two drives that led to 10 points. Tulane did put a nice drive together, but it only got them a field goal. And after that, like we kind of started to run away with it. Drones was sensational on the next drive, had another long run, the throw to Gosnell for the score, and it was more or less over. We added a touchdown on the 12-yard run by Tootin, 41-20. Hokies win. What was your prediction again, Rob?
I said that I felt as though we could. This is the type of game that we should win by 21 points, and we won by 21 points. And I got blowback from all three of you guys on
I
that.
gave you blowback. I admit it. I scoffed. Well, I should say there was a snicker when you immediately said it. French shook his head no,
Yeah,
and I said I have my Virginia Tech fear brain. I can't wrap my head around projecting a 21-point win. But
21
kudos to
points
you, man.
lost.
You nailed it.
I will one up what I did on that. So, if you can believe it, this was my game. So I'm up in Ohio, and my brother-in-law is on a chain with a bunch of Ohio State guys. They do a bet for doing bowl games. So they'll all throw together $5. They put 25 bucks on a parlay. So they're like, he's like, what should I bet on? So I go through this huge list of all these bets. I said, give me Tootin receiving for more than 7.5 yards, Drones just scoring a touchdown, and then drones rushing for more than 56 yards. Dude, we hit the parlay in the first quarter. And it took until the second quarter because drones had negative 18 yards, if you
Oh,
remember, on that
yeah.
fumble. So
Yep.
that was negative yards, but he still put up whatever 100 and what, 70 yards or some insane thing. So anyway, they hit the parlay, and then all the guys were like, dude, why isn't this guy giving us bets like all the time? Like he just destroyed this parlay bet.
What was the plus on that parlay? Like do you know what the return was?
I think it paid out like 175 or 200 or something like that on a $25 bet. So
Nice.
plus,
That's pretty
what,
legit. That's like plus
yeah.
800 or
Yeah,
something.
but
Like
yeah. So it was, and just demolished it. It was awesome. But
that
anyway,
is
I
sweet.
got I
You're
got both
feeling
things
like a
right.
big guy at the party after that.
I was feeling awesome. I didn't put any money on it, but I helped some other people out.
I like it, dude. So, what would you say your story of the game was? Oh, actually, hold on. Let me play the
Yep.
voicemails. I
Oh
got a
yeah.
couple. I got a couple of calls. Not too many, but it'll make you laugh.
We are here in Annapolis, Maryland. We're eating wings. We're eating damn good pizza by Stephen Wright, VT.
Hey, Pete and Robbie, what's going on? What a great bowl game win. Get us at 7-6 the end of the year. We were able to dominate up front in the rain and the nasty weather.
We are going to take everything that they give us and turn it into gold.
Had some turnovers, but both teams had those. That's gonna happen in that sloppy field. But I'm gonna tell you, these offensive Hokies and the defensive guys that we got coming back, it's very promising moving forward.
And what they turn this is going to be our touchdown. Let's go, Hokies. Let's go, Hokies. We are here in Annapolis, Maryland.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh,
That was Hack.
Yeah.
I think he was having some fun
I think so.
before the game.
Yeah.
And the best part was like at the end, first of all, like I couldn't even tell what he was saying. There was an
No.
expletive in there, but it was like blah 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 blah. It's gonna be our touchdown. Like it
Yeah.
was just like something just nonsense gibberish. And then the let's go. Like I'm expecting like a crowd of tailgate people to all respond.
No,
It's like
nothing.
one
Just
guy.
just one guy. Yeah. Yeah. Yelling Hokies.
I loved it. I loved it.
Great voicemails, and a great way to cap off the season right there on voicemails, because it's been a wild season on the voicemail channel. I love
It
it.
really has been. I think I might compile all of the voicemails
Yeah.
and put them out in like a little, extra show at some point
Mhm.
in the next couple weeks.
I love
But
that.
that I feel like that could be a fun trip down memory lane there. But sloppy conditions in this
Yeah.
one. What was your story of the game?
Um, the story of the game for me, just an absolute, 300 yards on the ground. I think, or 300 and or 200 and whatever, 80 yards, 90 yards between. No, it was 300.
It
I'm
was
just looking at it.
360,
Yeah,
yeah.
360. I think that's got to be it. The combination of what drones and Tootin were doing to them, in particular in the second half, and demoralizing that, in the combination of the offensive line really putting an exclamation point on a season of improvement. What really started as, um, v- I wouldn't even say concern, almost panic amongst the fan base on what was going to be happening and what that offensive line meant, and the development and the progression of them into the end of the season in order to really win, and then by the end of the game really demolish them in the trenches, I think was the story for me.
Yeah, they were able to wear them down, and part of the story was just the conditions and the ball being loose so much. I felt like there was at least 8 times that the ball
Yeah.
was on the ground, maybe 9. Uh, but it was our run game, and the rushing attack by Drones and Tootin, and that combination has to be the story of the game. I read this on one of the notes on Hokie Sports from Damian Salas that It was the most rush yards in a game for the Hokies since 2009, and
Wow.
against Marshall when we went for 444 when we had like that trio of running
Mhm.
backs.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a special performance. I still need to go back and check. I don't think he's putting out, and I could have just read it wrong, but
Mhm.
that's what the game that came up was the 2009 Marshall game. So it's like, dang, that was a really
Yeah.
impressive rushing performance. And it came against a team that was a top 10 rush defense throughout the year.
Yeah.
I know they're in the AAC, but
Mhm.
like that was what they did. They stopped the run throughout the season with some great D line play. And guess what? Those guys played. They
Yeah.
weren't, even though they were in the portal, like they all played in the game. Um, Maybe they didn't have their defensive coordinator. I don't care. The
Yeah.
players were there and we ran all over them. 7.2 yards per carry with that 362. It wasn't just like we ran it 70 times. Like we were getting good chunks of yardage. And you noted there were a couple losses. Like we
Mhm.
had the 18-yard loss. There was another 7-yard loss. Drones had, I think, negative 30 rushing yards due to some of the fumbles and we still put up 360.
Yeah.
So it was ridiculous. 453 total yards of offense in what was basically a monsoon
Yeah.
for for a lot of the game. 6.4 yards per play. So I was so impressed with what Drones did in this game.
Yes. You hit on it. My only takeaway concern is the weather was so bad. The continued issues with the ball security. I get it early on, even with the scoop and score. It's like, you got to get your head right. And it's like the ball is going to be slippery as hell. You got to be good, put two hands on it, that kind of thing. But it just like kept happening throughout the game. It repeated. And I thought that would have been cleaned up by the second half, and it was just a continuous problem. But it was bad weather. I'm not really that wrapped up about it. Uh, Drones just, I mean, it was just so punishing on what he was doing, and they had no answer for it whatsoever. And when they tried to contain him, then Tootin would really just, punish him. So overall, it was just a really nice game. And honestly, it was really nice setup for next season and a demonstration of what this team can do with all these playmakers.
I know. And it's funny because those two players, they accounted for all of the touchdowns. Drones had 3 total, Tootin had 2. And
Mhm.
French was commenting in his article that like the progressions that it wasn't just his running.
Mhm.
He was checking the ball down when he needed to, making the right decisions, and that is a very positive moving forward. Not to mention the career high in rushing yards or the military bowl record for rushing
Yeah.
yards or the VT bowl record for rushing yards, which he had.
Yeah.
Uh, he actually did show growth as well in just being a quarterback going through progression. So that was awesome. Tootin, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tulane hadn't given up a 100-yard game to a running back in 34 games.
Wow.
And there you go. Tootin
There you
just
go.
blasted that by 36 yards. So that was awesome. One thing I got from the Roth report, which I love what Bill Roth does with some of his analysis, and that went up on Hokie Sports too. Tech is tied now going into the national title game with the lead in the nation with 16 runs of 30 yards or more
Hmm.
because we had 3 in that game.
Wow, I did not even think about that as something that we would be leading the nation in. That's awesome.
And I mean, obviously most of that is Tootin and Drones, but
Yeah.
like we had Tucker Holloway,
Mhm.
XTB, some of the other guys contributing as well. So that is really cool. And French also pointed out in his thing that he put up, it was a good showing by the OL, especially as the game wore on. It
Yeah.
was a stout run D, but they were blocking well, particularly Caden Moore. And the skill position players were
Yeah.
blocking really well. Lane,
Mhm.
Aiden Green was blocking well, even, and he had that really sweet catch.
Yep.
He mentioned some other guys. Felton had a good block here or there, and whatever. But with Daquan Wright, our starting tight end, not playing, seeing those two tight ends block well, catch well. You got Nick Gallo coming back. It's exciting, man. Like
Yeah,
it is really exciting right now.
I would agree. And um, I'll finish. I will dovetail the rushing performance into the defense by saying one could make the argument that in a sloppy weather day, that you're always going to have an advantage running the ball, and there's going to be more yards on the ground. However, the counterpoint to that is we went up against a really solid running back in Hughes and held him to 88 yards on 15 carries. And quite frankly, we really stymied him for most of the first half. And he had a series or two where he really broke off some chunk plays and made up most of those 88 yards. And then we tightened down on him again subsequent to that. So if you want to take the thought process that some of that rushing success had to do with the weather, then I think you also have to look at what the defensive line and the linebackers were able to do against a really solid running back.
Right. They had a very good running. And you know what? I think if you're a Tulane fan right now, you're sitting there looking at Hughes's carries and you're like, it's pouring rain. We're playing with these backup quarterbacks, and you're not giving me the ball basically every play because he
Yeah.
had a good average. Now, I agree with you. Some of that was because of a
Mhm.
break here or there, but that's how running backs operate. Like
Yeah.
maybe if he would gotten 10 more carries, he could have broken some. But to our luck or to the way our defense was showing the looks, they didn't run him as much. We only gave up 252 yards and 4.7 yards per play. And them getting 20 points was mostly due to turnovers. I
Yes.
mean, the scoop and score was 7, and
Yep.
then the other one was the short field that we gave them. So
Mhm.
if we held on to the ball better or just a few things swung the other way, like we could have won this game by 3 or 4 scores. But
Yeah.
overall, even with that stuff going wrong, I thought the defense had a really nice day. Like
Yeah.
they ultimately, when they had to buckle down, they buckled down. And this was my favorite stat, and I'll let you give a few observations. 1 red zone TD in 5 chances for Tulane.
Yeah.
1 TD.
Man, did they really tightened up when they got into the red zone. That was I was surprised when I looked at the stat line afterwards that it was 1 sack. Granted, 6 tackles for a loss, but there was a lot more havoc in this game than the stats let on. And that the defensive line I was extremely impressed with in what they did in this game. And um, they it kind of sucks because we're losing those guys, but I am very happy for them because their performance was excellent in this game, and overall, uh, I couldn't I couldn't really have asked for more because aside if you take away the ball security issues, as you said, the defense played an absolutely lights out game.
Yeah.
They did, and I still think even with the ball security issues, they played a lights out game because you can't really punish them for really 14 of those points or so.
Yeah. And there was those 6 tackles for loss. 2 of them were by Jenkins, who I don't know what his story is yet. We're still waiting to hear his final determination on whether he'll come back, but
Yeah.
he was good. Mose Phillips making the start at one of the safety positions, put up 7 tackles and that forced fumble.
Mhm.
We had talked about him in fall camp. Like we'd been hearing good things about Mose Phillips. I think this was a nice building block for him and that
Yep.
he could be a very key player for us next year. And then Tisdale, French said he probably played his best game of the season
Yeah.
and maybe his best game in a couple years. And so
Mhm.
that is awesome for him because he's going to be going out the door, but he is going to do an interview with Pat and Billy, I think, later this week. So look for that on the Sons of Saturday channel to get an interview with Tisdale, who like he's been around forever, man. He's seen so many different coaches and everything,
Yeah.
position coaches, head coaches. Like he's been through a lot,
That'll be
and has made
enlightening.
he played like 50 games or something, like absolutely
That's nuts.
ridiculous number of games over the years. So I would look for that interview, but played a great game. And the defense it was a team effort. and they really came to play. If you look at our final season numbers, we finished number 20 in total defense, which that's a stat that people don't love as much anymore, but it's still impressive. We were 2 in the ACC, number 2.
Yeah.
In yards per play, a stat I like a little bit better. We were 3rd in the ACC and 28th overall. So this was a top 30 defense by a lot of different metrics. And you had said before the year, your hot take was a top 25 defense in SP+. Now, we didn't quite get there.
I know.
But we were close in so many other categories. I'm going to give it to you.
That was damn. That was kind of. I'm trying to think back on that as a guess for the season, but it happened in a way that was obviously much different than I anticipated. But the building blocks are really where it all formed. So I'll take credit for it.
We were also number 1 in pass yards allowed per game in the ACC. And then that's a little misleading because we didn't play a ton of great passers and teams could run on us. So they did. 6th in passer rating allowed. The final one, and I think one that we all want to hear the most, 11th in the nation in sacks per game.
Wow.
Like that is amazing. Like I don't care what the O-lines were. I don't care what the competition was. You put up that many sacks and you finished number 11 and number 2 in the ACC when you've got Florida State and Clemson in your conference.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
I agree.
In this
and Louisville, who had a good defense.
Right. Louisville, they did have a good defense. You're right. Special teams were in this game. For this game, they were fine. The 2 field goals, it looks like we got our kicker because all year we've been praising John Love. You said he was the biggest snub on the all ACC thing. 2 field goals, 1 from 51. I mean, this kid's awesome. And then we had that muffed punt recovery.
Yes.
So we didn't really get a chance to return any kicks in this one. I think Tootin had a couple like kickoff returns or whatever.
61 yards for Tootin on 3 kick returns.
Yeah.
Is what he had. So a 20 average.
But it's still, it was a plus on the special teams side of things. Better than Michigan.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Yes.
Final thoughts and takeaways. I already said the thing about us. If we had held onto the ball a little bit better, this would have been a larger margin of victory. Did you have like any commentary or thoughts just on the way it played out? And obviously it kind of went the way you expected.
It went exactly how I expected. I said, if you really believed in this team for next season and what they could do, playing in the Military Bowl, having it be a relatively home field advantage and returning 7 stud players for next season, this was not a game that I would have seen us mailing it in. In fact, it was very much the opposite. This is a game that they were using as a stepping stone for 2024, and that's what we saw in the field. Who knows if there was more adversity, not just a scoop and score. If we went down by 21 points, I don't know what we would have seen, but the way that it transpired is what I thought would happen. And that's showing out what these players are capable of for a building block for next season.
Yeah. And I was very satisfied because that I was nervous going into this game. This was an 11-win team. And once I saw that a number of their key defensive players were going to play, I just felt like, okay, this isn't, because our schedule, the way it played out, we played good teams and we played bad teams. And when we played the bad teams, we crushed them. Played the good teams, it was a struggle.
Yep.
And this was an in-between team. Without Pratt, I would still put them in that in-between category. And we went out there and we still won the game by 3 scores, something we did to a number of lesser teams this year. But this was a ranked win. Yeah. And that's just a fact. I know Pratt didn't play, but I don't care. They were ranked. We beat them. They won 11 games and we beat them. This was a big win, and not just because they're ranked, because that's all on perception. It's a big win for our momentum into this offseason. And Pry had talked about that repeatedly. And I have always pushed back on the idea that bowls don't mean anything. And I think you've been in the same camp. They mean a lot from a fan base engagement and excitement perspective. That would be kind of how I would phrase it. Selling the winning season in year 2 from your coach in the recruiting trail, that's going to be huge. It could help us get ranked in the AP poll going into next year, potentially, which would be great for program perception. These games are far from meaningless, is the way I would put it. Like, I think a lot can be, your program can be helped quite a bit by going out, playing well, and winning your bowl game.
So that narrative that bowl games are meaningless is kind of a crock of shit for a couple of reasons. Yeah, one, it is not meaningless for teams 1 through 4, obviously, because now they are competing for the national
1 through 12.
championship. Right. Soon to be 1 through 12. It's not meaningless for teams 12 to 30. And really beyond, if you think about it, maybe at the back end, you start to see some fall off because it's like, this isn't really going to do much for us. But for teams 12 to like 35, bowl games are important. Or unless you're in the ACC and you have an ego, and you're like, we don't need it. But it is, because I was listening to the Ohio State guys all trash on the fact that they were playing in, a BS game that they didn't really care about and all that stuff. But, and that's true. I don't think Ohio State only putting up 3 points and really just, shooting themselves in the foot in that game and not being able to amount to any offensive production, that means all that much for them. But that's because they're recruiting at such a high level. Their talent is at such a high level. They don't need to take and get all the small wins in order to really put together a great 2024 season. The teams 12 through 30 need things to go right for them, and they need building blocks. They have the building blocks, right? They have the infrastructure, they have the recruiting talent, all those sorts of things. The teams 12 through 35 need to do all the small things right in order for it to build into something that's bigger. And this is a part of doing the small things right.
This is going to link perfectly into the thing I wanted to talk about next, which was thoughts on the program and Pry, and linking into Shelton Moss's article that he put out on TKP. But I did want to mention first that regarding Ohio State, quickly, since 1978, when D1 expanded to its current form, more or less, and having the D1A, which has now become FBS, Ohio State has precisely 2 national championships, 1978 to 2023, 2 national champions. It's not like they win this thing every year. So maybe you should take the Cotton Bowl a little bit more seriously next time. Like that's my thing. Like, everyone thinks like, oh, Ohio State and Penn State and these teams, they all win. Nobody wins. Like, Alabama wins. Nobody else wins. Like, even Georgia, it took them 40 years to get back to the title and win it.
Right.
So like, you should relish these opportunities to play in a Sugar Bowl, a Cotton Bowl, a Fiesta Bowl. The fact that people don't take these things seriously is silly to me, but I don't have an NFL future, so what do I know?
And I would agree with what you just said. Look at Texas. So look who was on the sideline for Texas. The last time that they were relevant was when that quarterback was starting, and guess what? He looked old as shit on that sideline, and he looked old. And
guess what? Texas has 1 title since 1978, and that was Vince Young.
But even the best teams in the most fertile like recruiting grounds with oil money coming out their ears can go decades without even reaching it. So it's like, you can act above it, but the narrative and the numbers don't lie that you're really not. So get over it.
That's what annoys me so much about. I know Florida State got screwed. We went over it repeatedly, and we were on Florida State's side. But Kirby Smart's comments after the game were 100%. Like, that was stupid. Like, that game, they should have just boycotted, like 63-3 or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Like, that was an absolute joke. How then again, Georgia did that to TCU in the national championship the year before. So,
that's right.
I don't know. Maybe that's just Georgia, but anyway. I wanted to link it back to the Pry article that Shelton put out, because our conversation and just the idea about bowl games links to culture and what Pry seems to be building at Virginia Tech. And the quote that I'm taking from Shelton is, in today's age, bowl games are a reflection of a team's culture.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if I could editorialize that, it would be, bowl game performance is a reflection of a team's culture. Because there's plenty of teams that go to bowls, and I think that's what he more or less meant. And if you read the article, which is fantastic, and you should read it, it's great. But the idea that bowls and the way you participate and the way you play to be a reflection of your culture, I think is spot on. He highlighted the many opt-outs, the early NFL departures and transfers during the Fuente years.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that me and you had talked about many times, that guys didn't want to play for him 1 second longer than they absolutely had to. Like, once they had a chance to go to the NFL, they were gone. As soon as they could transfer with any reasonable tape, they were gone. And that is not what we're seeing with Coach Pry.
Yeah, it's not. And let me give you an example of that I think will nail this perfectly. And I'm going to use, I know we've been talking a lot about Big Ten teams, but let's just use this as an example. Let's take this season and how it played out. What do you think would have happened if Michigan played Georgia in the Cotton Bowl?
So Michigan did make the CFP, and they're playing a quote unquote meaningless game.
Yeah.
I think Harbaugh's guys would have played.
That's my point. And that is a culture. If you want to explain what's happening at Ohio State right now versus what's happening at, like, Ohio State still believes that their shit doesn't stink and they're too good for what they're playing in. And Harbaugh's team does not. They are gritty. They are tough. They are in there. They would play Georgia and look at that game and maybe not relish it. They would be bummed that they didn't, like they should be, that they didn't make it into the college football playoff. But I guarantee you that even if they were missing a quarterback, any of those things, they would have put up a better fight than a 64-3 game or whatever.
Well, we have an example, and it's when Jake Butt decided to play in the bowl game, and he blew up his knee, and he compromised his NFL career. Guess what? He still chose to play in the game, and that was right. A Harbaugh team. I'm pretty sure that was under the Harbaugh regime. And so, and I think you're right, though. There is that buy-in there, and it was clear in the Military Bowl, a soggy, crappy Tier 3 bowl. We wanted to be there. We wanted to win, and it showed in the way we played, which reflects on Pry and his staff and their ability to get buy-in. And it's right in our intro. If you listen to our intro on the podcast feed, he says, relationships are very important to me. And it's the signing day stuff with the draft and the families being there on video. It's the high school coaches being invited to the bowl practices. It is all about building relationships and reaping those rewards down the line, whether it's the first time you get the recruit or, like we said, finishing second place and getting it. But Pry, and I think, like, some of our fans, and we've joked about this, like, him being like, thanks for coming out. You know, our fans are the best in the nation and all. He is a master of communication. He is so articulate. He knows exactly what to say. Think about his interviews, though, even post-game interviews, podcast interviews. There is some coach speak. There's obviously always some, but he is usually exceedingly genuine and honest compared to most coaches. Like, he's one of the very few coaches of any of my teams, if, Phillies, Sixers, Eagles, like, that I watch his pressers and I feel like I learned something. It's not just a bunch of fluff. Like, oh yeah, we're going to hit the next play hard. We played together. Like, no, I feel like I learned something. It's not fluff. And so, like, that is the difference with him. And listen, we got our first winning season in a while. We could potentially be victims of the moment, but, like, it comes back to that joke of Pry gets it. He just gets it organizationally, culturally. And I feel like he's the right guy to bring us back. And we could be on the precipice of that.
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And college football has changed more dramatically in like the last 5 years than it did in the previous 20. And I think that is a very easy statement to make given what happened with transfer rules and what happened with NIL. And if you are not one of the top 8 teams in recruiting and stuff like that, you need to relook the way that you are as a program and how you are approaching things. And it is, some said that building a culture doesn't matter now. I think we may look back in 15 years and say for the tier 2 teams, building a culture was more important now than it ever was.
Yep.
Period. Owning your recruiting ground, especially if you're in a fertile area like we are, building the fan base to get money into the program, to be able to throw NIL money at guys. That requires fan buy-in, which requires a coach that's approachable and likable when you aren't one of the schools that just brings in money regardless of whether things are going well or things are going shitty. To be in an area like Blacksburg, which is awesome, but it's off the beaten path. It's 4.5 hours from DC, right? You have to make it a destination for people to go be a part of that culture. There now, I think, is we're going to look back and realize that saying and doing the right things and being honest with the fan base and with the players and building not I wouldn't say we're like a Michigan toughness type culture. I think we are more of a commitment type culture, which is like, let's build a team together and make it stick together. And yes, we'll be fair with our dealings and fair with how we pay our players. And I think that will carry us as far as we can go because there is a ceiling on the programs that are outside of that top 6 to 8. There just are. And that ceiling you could look at not as a 1-year ceiling, but as a multi-year ceiling, right? There that is very hard for anybody like that. And we saw it with TCU, you see it with Washington, how long it took them to get back after they were in the playoff before. There is a lot of build that has to happen and things have to go your way. And you have to make your own luck by doing the right things when nobody's looking.
And I think our staff knows that and recognizes that. And I think it's refreshing to have a plan because one of my bigger beefs with Fuente was not his game day coaching or his demeanor with the press or anything like that, or shutting off practices. It was, I didn't feel like there was a plan. When I see there's 12 running backs on the roster, there's no plan. I don't know where your recruiting ground is because you're bringing from Texas and you're bringing from here and here and here, and it doesn't make any sense. There was a lack of organization and there was a lack of a plan. We have that now. At the very least, we have that now, and it seems to be getting results. And with the bowl win, think about you were talking a little bit about the buy-in from the fans and the money and stuff. Think about how much that bowl win and just the success at the end of the season will have on ticket sales for next year, on the spring game and people attending, the interest in the program, merch, all of that stuff. And that, that builds. And then you add that to this and you keep it just, that's what's exciting about right now, is because the hardest part is where we were 2 years ago, building it from nothing, ripping it down to the studs, hiring a whole new staff, starting relationships all over again, winning 3 games. Like, you have nothing to sell other than we're going to be different. Take my word for it. We're going to be different.
Yeah.
Now there is a result to point to. We had a winning season in year 2. And you know how excited our fans are going to be. And it's the beauty of expectations, right? Because there were several years where we won 10 games and we come back the next year and we're not as excited as we're going to be for this upcoming season. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Yes. Expectations go a long way. And, showing that your use of money and who it's going to is leading to real results is important, I think. And that's another piece of this. So I am very, very pleased with how the season ended up and what this team ended up accomplishing. And you talk about how the years, 3 wins and then starting and ripping it down. The team went through a micro version of that in the middle of the season, right?
True.
So like sometimes there's the big trends, there's the medium trends, and there's the small trends, and they seem to be aligning together, and which is nice.
Yeah, and we could talk about that turnaround. That's something the TSL guys discussed, something that Shelton discussed a little bit in his article. We could go through that for another 20 minutes, but
Yeah.
we'll save the listeners from that. Before we get to our national championship discussion and close this thing out, the 2D Pokies Under the Influence podcast is also brought to you by Roback. You guys know Roback. It's the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. It's the same polo company that had the VT polo, the VT quarter zip. They had a couple different VT polos, including the white with the maroon Virginias and then the maroon on maroon quarter zip. That's the Commonwealth and the Berg. Go to roback.com. You can find those, but you can also find shorts, joggers. They have things your wife would love, like these full body suits. My wife sees them every time. Like I go to the site, especially over Christmas. I was buying a few things, and she's like, "Oh, I want that." And it's like, okay, let's hold back on a few things in the cart, but like, yeah, you can get that 20% off your order using code 2DVT. So if you do want to get your wife something nice, it's the new year, new wife, new life, new year, whatever it might be, treat her to something nice. Go to roback.com, use code 2DVT. Oh, they got the tennis skirts too. And of course, the polos. So head over to Roback, load up your cart, crave activity. I wanted to ask you about the national championship game. The line right now, Michigan -4.5. Think about that for 1 second. This holiday ale from New
Mhm.
Belgium is awesome. It's
Is it?
you know what it is? It's a pumpkin beer, but swap out the pumpkin and replace it with cranberry. Like
Oh.
it's got those spices and that flavor, but
Hmm.
it's light, but it's got that cranberry sweetness. So I would almost say, remember the Shipyard
Yeah.
Pumpkinhead?
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
that, but with cranberry instead of the pumpkin flavor. That's
Ooh,
how
I
it
like
looks.
that.
Yeah, it's good.
Mm.
I'm enjoying it. What are your thoughts on how this game's going to play out?
If you listen to the podcast the last 5 to 9 weeks when I've been all over Washington, feels as though I have to be all over Washington again. But that Michigan team with a cleaned up special teams uh, would have been very hard for anybody in the nation to beat. That game would have been very different if you don't have that early touchdown from Alabama on that muff punt. They had another muff punt that was nearly catastrophic for them near the end zone that screwed up one of their drives. Just a lot of just mistakes throughout that game. I think if that was all cleaned up, that Michigan team is very tough to beat. That said, this is that Michigan defense against this Washington offense is going to be awesome. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. That is strength on strength to no end. So I'll see. I think the bigger question is whether Michigan's, in particular, Michigan's run offense has its way with Washington's defense, and I don't know what that's going to look like.
I I think I'm with your original thought in that I like Washington in this game. And I was not a Washington believer for most of the year. I
Mhm.
thought Oregon would get the best of them the second time around because the game was in Washington. But Washington, they went out and beat them in the Pac 12 title game. And they followed that up with a win over a very good Texas team who had beaten Alabama earlier in the year. So you
Mhm.
can say, no, Washington hasn't beaten any team by a couple scores in weeks and weeks and weeks. I know that. And we could go all the way back to October and you could keep saying that, but they keep winning. And they've got NFL players on the outside. Their D line they made life hard for Quinn Ewers in that game.
Yeah.
They really did, and their offensive line is spectacular. And
Mhm.
so, while Michigan was dominant, especially earlier in the year, when they played Penn State, when they played Ohio State, do you think they dominated those games? They won those
No.
games, and they
Yeah.
won them handily, but they
Yeah.
didn't dominate. And against
No.
Alabama, they almost lost. And
Yeah.
that's an Alabama team that's kind of one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And so I have questions about Michigan. They were my number 1 team all year. Like, I think I might have swapped them out of the number 1 spot once in my playoff 4. Like, I had them at number 1 before the season, and I had
Mhm.
them at number 1 for, like, 13 out of 14 weeks. And so I like Michigan a lot, but I don't think any team this year is elite, as I said earlier, and Washington just they have dudes and they have the better quarterback. Like,
Yeah.
those nerves from McCarthy that we saw at the
Mhm.
beginning, he threw a pick on the first play.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
and
that's true.
they overturned it, but, like,
Mhm.
that was a pick or
Yep.
should have been. And, like, he wasn't great. Now, their offensive philosophy, the way they like to play bully ball with Corum, it could lead to possessions that would favor the outcome of Michigan.
Mhm.
But I don't know if they're gonna get that chance. Like, I don't know if they're gonna be able to sit and run the ball all day, because I think every time that Washington goes out there, like, we did see there was a few times where the Michigan DBs were struggling.
Mhm.
And I know that Bama didn't pass for a lot of yards, but, like, it's a
Yeah.
completely different quarterback, completely
Yes.
different. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's gonna put a ton of pressure on former VT commit Mike Sanistrella or whatever it is back there, and Cam Good on the defensive line. I
Yeah.
think that Washington's gonna win the game, and if you're giving me points, like, I'm gonna take those points.
I would take the points as well. I think everything sets up for I'll be surprised if there's a situation where, Washington loses by 10 points or 14 points. I don't see that happening. I think this is going to be a close game because e- either either the game is going to look like what we just saw against Texas, where Washington has control because of their offense throughout the game, and maybe Michigan kind of tries to claw its way back in, or Washington is dangerous whenever they are on the field. You could be up by 10 points, and that could, in a blink of an eye, with those wide receivers and that quarterback, be a long 60-yard touchdown. And this is back to a 3-point game. So
Mhm.
I I know it would be a lot to ask for after those two great games that we just had, but I have a feeling that this could be another really good one.
Think about the pressure that both Oregon and Texas were under in both of those games. Like,
Yeah.
there was a general feeling, we need to keep up with this team. If they do that to Michigan, do you think JJ McCarthy is capable of keeping up? Now,
No.
they could their
Well,
defense could stymie Penix. They could get to him, they could hit him, and it could be a different outcome. But I feel like Washington's gonna put up points, and I just don't know if the Blake Corum running game is gonna be enough to keep up with that.
I mean, I will say this: Blake Corum is an absolutely ridiculous running back. I
Oh,
mean,
I love Blake Corum,
he
yeah.
is he was dead to rights on a number of plays and then turned them into 15-yard, runs on that. So if no, my answer is no, but what I could see is a consistent 4 quarters of continually getting first downs and
Mhm.
wearing down this Washington defense with Corum, and then that allowing some opportunities for McCarthy to make a throw here and there. I do not see this as an explosive team. What Michigan needs to keep ahead of the chains and just make this a consistent effort for their offense and wear down this Washington defense. They cannot get into an explosive football game against Washington.
Right.
That will not go well. They need to slow the game down. They got to keep it, and that's going to be hard to do whenever Washington sees the field. But when they have the ball, they need to slow it down, stay ahead of the chains, 5-yard chunks, and then just drain out the clock over the course of 4 quarters.
Unlike the last game, Michigan needs to play mistake-free football, or I don't think they can withstand the number of mistakes they made against
Yeah.
Alabama and win the game against Washington, which sounds weird, but
Yeah.
like with how lethal the Washington offense is, Alabama didn't have the ability to make Michigan pay enough for all of the mistakes they made.
Yep.
Washington does. And so
Oh, yeah.
Michigan needs to play a mistake-free game. And hey man, I'm excited to watch it with you. And we're going to get a schedule out there for the game watch. I'm going to get it to the boys, and then we'll get it out on Twitter or X for the amount of guests and the time slots and all that kind of stuff. And listen, this is going to be a challenge. We've got a lot of different people that are going to be coming into the stream, so we're going to do our best to manage it. But I guarantee you this: it is going to be a fun viewing experience for all of you that decide to spend the national championship game on the Sons of Saturday YouTube channel. But I'm going to take Washington with the points, and I'm going to, if I was sprinkling some on the money line, that's what I would do. And that, I think, is that you're going to take them with the
I
points?
have to take Washington.
Yeah.
I can't sell out on them now after taking them against Oregon and that silly 9-point spread or whatever it was, 8.5.
Dude, you were calling for them. You said 9 weeks ago. It was close to that. I mean, because I said, I was like, I think I like Oregon. And you're like, no, I'm going with Washington. And I was like, oh, okay.
I just think Penix.
You've been more prescient. Is that the right word? Prescient this year? Is that how you say
it? Yeah. This year I've kind of seen things a little bit more clearly. And Penix he's just so good. I mean, he's just, and who knows what he'll end up being, when he gets if he makes to the NFL and what he does there and stuff like that. But he is such a rock star, college quarterback. It's awesome to watch.
He really is. He reminds me, and this isn't the best comparison, but like he reminds me of watching Deshaun Watson in college. Like that's what he reminds me of, which leads me to believe he'll be a good pro, but who knows before all the BS went down. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for hanging out with us this season. It was a fun one. It was one we didn't see coming after the first 4 weeks, and we turned it around and we finished with a bowl win in Annapolis. So I am stoked about what the future holds for Hokie football. Rob and I will be back at some point in the near future, but the first thing you're going to get is College Football Monday National Championship Special. Make sure you're tuned in next Monday night at 7:30. And until next time, go Hokies.